welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. The Group of Seven summit has concluded in Canada last weekend and proved to be rather confrontational. Before the summit even started, U.S. President Donald Trump has suggested that Russia should be allowed to return to the group of the world's leading industrialized nations. And at the end of the summit, he refused to sign off on the joint communique. At the same time, the G7 has reaffirmed their enduring support for Ukraine and promised to continue assisting in implementing its ambitious and necessary reforms. To talk more about the outcomes of the G7 summit, we're joined in the studio today by Vitaliy Martynyuk. He is the head of international programs and the Center for Global Studies Strategy 21. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Good day.
So what would you say are or is the main outcome of the G7 summit that has concluded in Canada over the weekend?
For Ukraine, the main outcomes are points of joint declaration concerning Russia and Ukraine. As for Ukraine, the main point is that G7 supports all countries of G7, besides Trump refused to sign this declaration. They support territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. And it is very important for us that these states are still confronting Russian aggression and confronting violation of international law by Russia in favor of Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Speaking of Russia, Russia has been expelled, so to say, from the G7 once it illegally annexed Crimea and started aggression in the east of Ukraine. And now Donald Trump has expressed a suggestion that Russia be readmitted to the G7, and all of the other leaders of the G7 countries were not happy with it. Now, how actually high are the chances that Russia could be readmitted to the G7 group?
I think that the chances are low, very low, despite the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the Prime Minister of Italy, with support of the Prime Minister of Italy, expressed idea to turn back Russia to this format, not to G7, but G8. But at the same time, according to final declaration, where all leaders supported key points on not allowing Russia to follow its policy in the world, to violate international law, to introduce its own ideas for other states, to violate even internal democratic processes, I mean electoral process and so on. So they don't allow Russia to do this. And these points were agreed before, despite Donald Trump left this summit before the end.
By the way, Donald Trump leaving the summit before the end of it, is it an act, a show that is supposed to be proving something?
I think that this situation showed us several disagreements between leading states.
Like what?
Mainly in economic sphere.
Are we talking about the trade war now? The probable trade war, okay, the alleged upcoming trade war.
I would not call this situation a trade war. More disagreements between states. Because a war means that there is no unity on the West. There is no unity between allies. And this situation happened just a month before NATO summit in Brussels. It's very important. So now we are expecting what would be in Brussels at the NATO summit, because Donald Trump insists not only that within this format of G7, but within the format of NATO, that the United States could not be responsible for all in the world, for security, for economy, for other issues. And step by step, Donald Trump would like to, as he said, make America first for him. So first of all, he thinks about American ideas,
which
American interests, and so on.
But the ways of showing it and the ways of doing it are kind of not appropriate at times. Anyway, I would like to come back to the question of alleged or possible trade war when all the other leaders of the G7 tried to have negotiations with Donald Trump and discuss the fees that has been risen on steel and aluminum. Even though Donald Trump announced that those fees would not be implemented until the summit is over, nevertheless, they were in practice starting June 1st. What is it? What's the move?
The tendency is that America neglects other interests of its European allies and even Canada, the closest ally, in economic sphere. And it is, I would not say so dangerous, but so sensitive for the situation in the world, in economy, in security and other spheres. Because nowadays it's very important to get unity in the world. When there are a lot of challenges and threats in economic sphere, in security sphere, terrorist threats, cyber threats, and so on, and threats from the Russian side, first of all. So these steps made by Donald Trump, they are not allowed for a leader of such a country, which the United States are.
Okay, that leads me to my next question. If Donald Trump continues to behave like this, is there a chance that the United States of America could also be expelled from the G7 and leaving it G6?
Yeah. Out of this format, so not officially, we can read that there is no G7. There is new format, G6
Explain.
plus 1.
G6
yes, it was written in
plus 1
different
is the
media.
United States, right?
Yeah,
okay.
In different media. But there were no announcements that other countries of G7, I mean Germany, France, Canada, Italy, and Japan, and the Great Britain, that they would insist on excluding the United States from this format. And it is impossible indeed.
Okay. Now, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, the leaders of G7 also had like a joint announcement that they would try to find a common ground on fighting cyber threats. Now, could you comment on that?
G7 concentrated on hybrid threats, including cyber threats, because this kind of threats become more actual and dangerous for every state in the world.
Right, they've gained so much popularity. They've gained. Now this is the real threat. Not even the nuclear war is as real, like is more real than the cyber threats. So the whole world needs to get around and put up a fight. Now, how should we do that? What did the leaders of G7 decide to do?
The leaders of G7 decided to improve the general situation in cybersphere. First of all, to train personnel to be able to counter cyber threats. The second, to increase cooperation in the sphere between states, including intelligence sharing. And the third, to study weaknesses in cyber system of each state, to develop new measures, and they agreed on early warning mechanism in cyber threats. And it is very important because cyber threats are more dangerous than other threats in the world. These threats don't demand a lot of money, from a state, aggressor state, but the consequences are very dramatic. And G7 leaders understand this situation. That's why they decided to deepen cooperation between the states and involve third parties in this process.
Well, like you said, Ukraine had a good outcome out of the G7 summit, and the NATO summit in Brussels is upcoming. What should we expect from that? I mean, Ukraine.
Yeah, we are coming to the Brussels NATO summit in July, and this lack of unity between allies is very negative signal for NATO and for Ukraine as well, because unity is a pillar of NATO. At the same time, we count that the next NATO summit to be held on 11th and 12th of July in Brussels could be positive for Ukraine, but not so successful for us. What I mean? I mean that from my point of view, NATO would express support to Ukraine, to Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty, to Ukrainian reforms, to Ukrainian aspiration to be a member of NATO, and Ukraine is now in the list of countries of aspirants. But we could not count on membership action plan at this summit.
At this point? Well, maybe in future.
In future, yes, but not this year. It could be a very positive result for Ukraine if Georgia receives membership action plan.
So there could be a sign that Ukraine can actually get it, right?
It could be a sign for Ukraine. It could be a sign for Russia that NATO is not going to stop, and it is going its enlargement policy.
Thank you so much for coming and having this interesting conversation with me.
Thank you.
That was Vitaliy Martynyuk. He is the head of international programs at the Center for Global Studies, Strategy 21. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned with UATV.